as my final project, which is a meditation application. So go to C3 final. I mean, you don't have to do it now, but definitely write it down. Within the next 2 weeks, it will be mandatory that you have entered in your information. If you know what you're going to do, submit it. If you think you might change your mind, that's okay. Submit what you got now, and then something else later. I will be sitting down, of course, with everybody and discussing the different challenges and paths you might want to take with your application. So the sooner you get something in, the better. Questions on the final project? I had one great question before class, which was if I want to continue working on my final project from the last class, can I do that? And I said absolutely, because in the last class we didn't get to learn that functionality aspect, and in this class we actually will get to learn it in 2 different ways to handle it. So without further ado, let us get into the good times of JavaScript. So to add JavaScript into our HTML page, it's very similar to adding a style sheet or CSS. We just put a script tag, like so. And where do you think we typically want to be putting our script tags in regards to the page? At the top, like our CSS?
At the bottom.
Why?
Because if the script takes time to load, then the page won't show until the script is finished loading.
Right. Modern browsers have gotten a lot smarter, and you can even put an attribute called async, meaning that it will kind of skip through it and load the rest of the content. But there's no reason why you wouldn't put it down at the bottom, considering there's going to be a lot of horrible browsers still around. Internet Explorer is a great browser. But yeah, adding it to your page is not crazy complicated. You put the 2 tags and put your code inside. There's also a way to link to JavaScript files, just like with CSS. And it's the same 2 tags, open and close, but nothing inside, and then a source attribute. Which other element uses the source attribute? Image, yeah. So it's a good question why aren't style sheets using source, but we won't get into that.
A question for the positioning.
Yes.
Usually when I've looked on reposters on GitHub, I see that the JavaScript file is linked in the head.
Which one?
I don't come up with an example. It's just by.
That is definitely not a popular thing on GitHub or anywhere else. So let's look at. It's like some training repositories. I'll probably need like some kind of a website. No, the boilerplates are good to look at. All right. So, anyone used the HTML5 boilerplate? If you haven't, you really should. I'd say like 99% of my websites start off with their template. I don't download it. I go straight to the source code and then distribution index.html. All right, so these guys are supposed to be the standard as far as how an HTML page should be structured. We have our style sheets at top. Normalize. Anyone recognize that one? Absolutely. Then we have our main CSS. Then we have this stuff, which is, again, Internet Explorer being amazing. We have to do these edge cases. Then the content, and at the very end, before the body close, we always put our script tags. But if you find some repository that's popular, I mean, I can figure out like why that might be the case. If it's like some really, really small file, like back in the day, using Modernizer, see that script called Modernizer? You actually have to put it on top of the page because it would create these elements like header, sidebar, etc. for Internet Explorer to be able to read them. So if you didn't put it in the header, it will look broken until it loads. But those are pretty rare edge cases where you would want to do that. It could be really top heavy. All right. So let's look at this example that I created for us. And this is actually one of those cases where CodePen is better for playing around with JavaScript than Visual Studio Code is. And I'll show you why. Oops. Go to the site. All right, we don't even need that. When I type in alert something, 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 there it is, pops up. But to figure out what they're actually doing to add that JavaScript code, I'm going to inspect and see how they're actually adding it to the page. All right. So let's see. There's my script tag. And then above it is some, I think, their own little JavaScript that probably reloads the page. If I add some HTML, it will add it to. So there's my body. The HTML part I put in here. The script goes down here at the bottom. Don't worry about this source URL thing. This is like modern, basically, systems make your JavaScript really, really small by taking away all the spaces and new lines. And they use these source maps to allow you to see it deformatted in the inspector. And if we wanted to do this very much vanilla, I'm going to open one of these random projects. Perfect. And new file, paste, save. Does this look like a HTML page? Yeah, somewhat. Really not happy with how minimal it is. So I'm going to use our little template and do it right. Not sure it looks. Go live. And as we were hoping, it alerts something. So that's great. Alert is actually a great way to get started because you don't have to look at the console. It's very much instant gratification. But we will get into showing you code in the developer tools as well. All right, so now that we know how to add some JavaScript to our page, let's understand a little bit more about JavaScript. So variables. Variables are an extremely important part of any programming language. In JavaScript, they are much easier because they're very loose in like having to declare which type of variable you're setting. So it makes our lives a lot better. And when you think of a variable, just think of a way to store a bit of information. In our case, let's say we want to store my name inside of a variable. So we type in var, short for variable. Then we put the name of our variable. Equals means assigning it the value of Mark. Now, what do you guys think those quotes might indicate to our JavaScript interpreter? They're saying, hey, this is text. Treat it as such. And we can later down our code change what is stored in that variable. Right? So if we think of a variable as like a bucket, we can first initialize that bucket saying, hey, let me go buy the bucket. So now I have this bucket called name. And I can throw a little mark card in it. Down the line, I'm like, you know what? my name is no longer Mark, so you can change your name to Ace. Am I changing what type of variable I'm storing inside of name? Are they both text? And how do we know they're text? Quotes. Rule in this class, only use double quotes, please, because it gets really confusing when you start using double and single quotes. It's a very good self rule to utilize. So now that we have this variable called name, how can we actually use it? So we created the variable called name equals Mark. Then we changed our mind about our name and we changed it to Ace. How could I make this useful? If I wanted to tell the user what the name is. What's that first command we learned? Alert. Now I know this is a lot of new syntax, so let's try to break it down a little bit and understand what's happening. In JavaScript, the one thing you got to keep in mind is each line has to end with a semicolon. So whenever you're ending some kind of a declaration, like calling alert and passing in name, you will put a semicolon. What other things besides text might we want to store inside of a variable? If my name is Angel, but my age is 21, what do you guys think would be the type of variable my age would be? Is it still text? Because if you think about text, text is not very mathematically manipulatable. So you could store something called an integer, basically call it a number. And I guess here we're storing my weight, which is 150. And how would I know that this isn't text or a string? What's that one easy way to tell that it's text or not text? Quotes. No quotes, right? So no quotes, that's fair. But are there quotes around name? No, that will make it text. So how can we differentiate between a variable and an integer like 150? How do we really tell numbers apart in the real world? If I said bar weight equals Z150, would that be a number? Is Z150 a number? Do we know? No. So that will probably be a variable. There are rules on the names that you could use for variables. For example, you cannot start a variable with, I believe, with a number. You cannot have spaces inside of your variables, so it cannot be n space aim. But at the end of the day, a variable is basically just like a class in CSS. That's the same naming techniques. You can use underscore, you can use camel case, but as long as it's being descriptive of what type of information we're storing inside of that variable, that's really all you're going for when you're choosing the name. Why would it be important to have slightly descriptive names if we consider that our JavaScript code might end up being, 100 lines of code, 1,000 lines of code, 1,000,000 lines of code? Would it be a problem if I have a variable called name on line 5 and then I forget that that variable exists? So 3,000 lines down, I create another variable called name. Will that possibly cause some problems? in CSS, if you have the exact same class called, button, and you redeclare it way down in your CSS code and change entirely what it does, is that a problem? Yeah, because you're relying that your button was doing something to a bunch of elements. Then you added some additional elements down the page called button, and you decided to make them completely different. Now you're having this fight. And let's look at how we can get help from maybe CodePen. Variable name equals zebra. Oops. And variable name equals Joe. What is name equal to now? Yeah, wait, right now? Variables equals z? Why? Actually, I think with variables it's not. With lets, I think it is. But oh, you mean the Joe part? Yeah. Well, it still is something. It's undefined, but it is something. So this will work. Let's try it. My bet is that right now, name will hold undefined. Typically, that's what I was hoping that CodePen has a good just value to tell us there's a problem. Joe is not defined. But I think a lot of people were thinking, since we first said that variable name is z, then it wouldn't change to Joe. But just like in CSS, the further down the declaration is, the more importance it has. It's called a functional language. Not all programming languages are like this, but JavaScript reads things line by line and executes as it goes down. So what do you guys think is a good way to prevent this happening? There we go. This is what I was hoping for. This little red thing they can tell us. Anybody? Good way to fix this problem. Is name a generic way to store information into something called name? Are there a lot of things that might potentially be kind of generalized down to the word name? Yeah. So typically you store a prefix like my name, or current name. Questions about a variable? Anybody have any thoughts on what a variable might be used for? Let's say we're building a trivia app which will ask you 10 questions. And for each answer, it will tally up your score. How could you use a variable to keep tallying up your total score? Could we maybe use an integer that starts off at 0 points? And for each right answer, so score equals 0. For each right answer, if right, we're going to say score equals score plus 1. So if we say score equals score plus 1, what are we saying? What's score here, the value of score? It's 0, right? So we've said score is 0. And now we're saying, hey, let's change score to whatever the current value of score is plus 1, meaning that if they get a second correct answer, what is the value of score in this situation? 1, right? We stored 0 plus 1 now is 1, and then 1 plus 1 makes it 2. So that's one useful situation. Another useful situation that I think you guys might relate to is in an authentication system, as soon as you type in your username and password, we store a value called isAuthenticated. And how could we possibly use that value when we're rendering the web page?
Could you personalize it, like use that person's information to place it into
Sure.
the website, like hi Jane or whatever?
Yeah, most commonly the actual isAuthenticated value will be to hide a button that says like add new tweet, right? Because if you're not logged in, you shouldn't be able to add a tweet or maybe edit profile. All those different user settings are hidden behind a isAuthenticated variable. What type of variable would isAuthenticated hold? Yeah.
Does case matter in the line?
It matters when you reuse it. So you can use like lowercase my, capital S, but then you have to make sure that yes, you're using the exact same. Which is why, as I said, force yourself to only use double quotes, and then once you choose a standard you like, either camel case, capitalizing every next word, or underscore, etc., keep using that same naming convention. So what would isAuthenticated store? What kind of value?
Yes, no.
Yes, no? 1, 0? Or in programming terms, it's false or true. So when we launch the page, what do we store in isAuthenticated? False or true? False. Then we're lucky enough to use Firebase and tell them, hey, just like the alert method, we say, is the guy authenticated or not? And it returns the value for us to change our authenticated with. All right. Yeah, variables are going to be really frustrating, considering that there are a few different types, and kind of getting that whole idea of, hey, I only one time initialize my variable because I know I'm going to be using it, and then down the road, I know I can change it just by calling the name itself and assigning a new value, or using the existing value to only append to it. All right, so if I've stored a variable called weight, which we did in the previous slide, which was 150, and then we create a whole new variable called new weight, what would we alert here when we combined 150 with 25? What's the new weight going to be equal to? 175. Because they're both numbers, and that's extremely important to keep in mind, because I promise you in JavaScript you're going to have very, very many situations where you're pulling your hair out because you're adding two things and it's coming out to something that you're not expecting. JavaScript is called a loosely typed language, meaning that you don't have to declare exactly what type of variable you're going to be storing. So instead you just say, it's a variable, and then you say, JavaScript, you figure out what kind of variable it is. And worst of all, you can change the type of variable that you have every single time. So if I have isAuthenticated equals false, I can then type in isAuthenticated equals quote angel quote. So it went from true false to a string. We see the quotes, and then I can change it to a number. And that, I promise you, gets extremely tricky. And then, of course, we can simply store two different variables with numbers and then add each variable. Does this remind you guys of anything you might have done in your life at some point? In math, right? So this would be like x, this would be y, and we're basically solving for x and y. Do Do you think those are good names to use for variables x and y? Absolutely not. There's a few rare situations where it makes sense, but pretty much always better to have some good naming technique. I like these names, original num. Why do we not say number? Yeah, you might have to type this 100 times, so if you can understand what num is, probably good to shorten it. Now let's see what we can actually do with strings besides store a single name. Let's say that we want to have a combination of thanks, then the name of the person, and then exclamation point. So how many strings are here in this alert? 3. How can we tell? Quote, quote, a string that stores the person's username. As somebody pointed out, this would be coming back from the authentication system telling you this is his name, and then exclamation point. These pluses, unlike with an integer, are not adding necessarily the items, they're concatenating. Meaning they're adding this string, which consists of a number of characters, and then appends these characters, and then those characters. You can, of course, store a separate variable for each of the strings. And why do you think you might want to do that?
So you can change it.
Yeah, so very often you might end up adjusting this message or having a few different cycling messages. Because it's really boring when you check out from buying some product and every single time it says, thanks, Angel. Instead, in FreeCamp, we like to always have like 20 different fun little messages that it will loop through. So be like, Angel, today is your day, or some fun like little saying. So you can switch between them by storing a number of different variables here. The more flexible, the easier it is to work with. Okay. Who can tell me what the alert will show when you run this code?
2 plus 2.
22.
22? Yeah. But is it 22 the number
String.
or 22 two basically words combined? Yeah, so we're literally saying, hey, I have a word with one character, 2, and another word that I'm adding to each other. So it's going to be 22, which can be quite inconvenient when the database returns maybe a string instead of an integer and you want to add them. So let's have everybody practice for a little bit. I'm going to walk around, get a little feel. And then there's a great huge amount of homework practice as well to get you guys started.
How is it supposed to work when you say open the items?
If it's not opening them, it might be you have to enable the pop-ups. Did you click open?
I did, and then it just gave me this.
Close that. And click on it again. It should. Which browser is this?
Chrome. What is that, dude? Oh, is this one? Oh, this is a HTTPS.
Okay, if you actually go to the ECU website, the latest blog post has all the links. There it is. So click on that little thing, and then say always. Because I actually use this for like opening when I have a lot of listed links. I want to open really quick.
There it goes.
Guys, if the links are not opening for you, look on the bottom right for how to enable Chrome to allow it. Hey Zoe, can you copy and paste that text that I sent you so you can look it up? You need help? What do you mean? Just the links that opened up from. Oh no, you should do like link at a time. You close them all. Oh, click on that. Yeah, that graphic on the bottom right will show you how to enable Chrome from spam menu. And if you do finish them, feel free to go to the bottom where the homework is and start cracking at some of those fun problems. Oh, UC's web dev. Yeah, there's a new article that I posted. If you haven't subscribed to so the very top, if you're on the very top left. You click on the left, so basically have to click on that, and then always allow, and then reload the page, and click opens. Hey guys, I think you might be experiencing this little issue here, so I'll show you what it looks like. What was it called? Was it JS? Come on, who can remind me? Links. Oops. Okay, see that little image on the bottom right? It will show up as soon as you click on this up on the right of the page here. And so you would have to basically say, yes, allow pop-ups. Always reload the page and click open. In the future, you could definitely use this. I love when I have like a long list of links that I want to open. It's really handy.
Or is click on something here, or
Yeah, so
click back in there, click on the little icon, click on always allow, and then done, reload.
and I'll click open. So basically open all the exercises. So you can close them.
Yeah, I just did the first 4 for now. And we're gonna be back in the rest at home and class.
Yeah, it gets really hard because a lot of these, if you follow their steps, you end up going to these very, very dark parts of JavaScript that are only going to confuse you a lot more than they help. So I was trying to figure out what are the ones that would be more helpful. Yeah, a lot of these are going to end up being homework for you to practice with. If you see some of these where like you're not sure what's happening, for example, there's one that's like times equals. Those are like shorthands in JavaScript, so just use the whole show answer thing if it looks really weird. Obviously, this is string 1 plus string 2. But then where was that? Yes, some of these get a little confusing. But you should be doing only the ones that open up for you. Don't go to like next problem after you submit your answer. Yeah, just keep closing the tabs. So like it opened up a bunch of tabs hopefully for you. Do the tab as soon as it says complete, close it. Next. Yeah.
You guys look up here and tell me why that's wrong. Yeah, JavaScript's sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing that Chrome does that because it doesn't want people to open up 50 tabs or 100 tabs for you. I think one time I've used it and I opened like 200 tabs. It's a good day for my computer. So yeah, case sensitive for sure. Car name below. And then on ucsbwebdev.college, you'll notice that there's a very similar content to the presentation I'm doing. It walks through those same parts. Then it has the exercise links, which I think the goal was to only do these 5, so I don't know how those sneaked in. And on the bottom is where all the exciting items are. All right, everybody look up here. Laptops semi-closed. Smileys on the faces. For this one, the silent teacher one, I really, really like it, but don't go past this little dot here. So it has this interesting progress indicator that's a spiral. So as I do these, they start off very simple. And let's hope, like, there we go. And notice how as you progress, you'll keep coloring each next spiral. So only go up until the one that, where was the spiral? There shows it. Nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th spiral, once you hit that, stop. It will confuse you more than it'll help. Huh? Yeah, I was gonna sneak those in, but I was hesitant. Alright. Now, here's where things get really exciting about JavaScript. It's when we start using an actual interaction with the user that it gets really fun. What do we typically use and associate with an interaction between us and the user when they come to our web page? What's the type of elements that interact with the user and get information from them?
Button?
Huh?
Button?
Buttons? Well, they submit information with buttons, but we get information with input fields, forms, text fields, image uploaders, avatar, camera recorders, etc. So once you can let the user actually give you information, things actually start getting really exciting, and that's the whole point of JavaScript. So we're not going to go into learning forms just yet because they get very complicated very fast. Instead, we're going to do what every 12-year-old that's trying to learn JavaScript in his bedroom, like me, is freaking out how excited they are they can build an interactive app with something called a prompt. Prompt is almost the same as an alert, except it alerts some information, which is typically a question, and then shows the user an input field where they can type in text. As soon as they click submit, we get that result back, and we can actually use it to do all kinds of cool things. So this is all we have to do. We create a variable, then we'll store, what do you think we're going to store in this variable? Yeah, I think it's actually always a string value that comes back from the prompt. So then we call our prompt just like we would with an alert. We pass a string, that's the question, and I think in very rare situations we pass this default value. So for simplicity's sake, can anyone tell me how different the prompt code looks from a alert? Anyone? What's the difference?
Because you stored the answer at spec.
We're getting a value back from prompt, but I'm just saying, just literally as you look at the text value itself, how different is the syntax? Almost the same. You have either a prompt replaced with alert, then parentheses, and then some text value. So let's do this. This is the most, honestly, I can't even tell you guys how out of this world it felt when I first used the prompt to get information. Var my prompt equals prompt. Oops, it's really fast. By the way, that's going to keep happening with alerts and prompts. So to stop that from happening, you go to Settings, Behavior, in Auto Updating Preview. I check that off. And that way, only when I say run, is it going to actually execute. So how old are you? So I save it, I run it, and there it is. How old are you? Yeah. You don't have to put the variable, but then the information that we get from the user is going to be basically, yeah, it'll be erased by the browser's memory real fast. So we need to store it so that we can actually use it for something. Can anyone tell me if they've ever seen this type of prompt jump up on a website they've used? Yeah? Really? This exact type? Yeah, so it's actually a big no-no in the developer world to actually use these prompts, and it's for a few reasons. The first reason is that you don't have any control over the styling, so it might not really fit with your website. The second reason is you actually just have in general no control over how it functions, how it can be dismissed. As one example, see how I'm clicking outside of it, trying to close it because I want to go back to my content. This type of behavior makes me, at least as a user, extremely agitated because I don't want to answer your question, I just want to leave. So when you have no control, you don't do it. The reason we do it is because it's a very nice and easy way to get started with collecting information from the user. So I'm going to put in some number here and then alert that value. So what do you guys think is going to be the result of this? There it is. Alerted. How could this be used? How could I use this to do something that a normal website would do? Yeah, so if I click login, it can pop up, ask you for your username, then pop up again, ask you for your password. There comes another problem with why we don't use these. You can't actually encrypt it so that the password appears as stars, meaning it's not secure, so you really wouldn't want to get a password from anybody that way. Okay, but in the short term, it is pretty exciting that we can now create a lot of different types of interfaces utilizing a prompt. As an example, yes?
How are you able to use variables to determine what the user sees? So for example, like one of the things I want to do is depending on what their answers are, my answers are.
Exactly, right? You see, absolutely, and that's like almost one of the biggest things, right? It's sometimes people log in to Facebook and then they say, oh, I want to minimize the site column. I don't want to see it anymore. And it stores that value. Hey, user Angel doesn't want to see left sidebar, so it hides it. Other times you're going to use that information to store. For example, sometimes we even store the actual width of the window so that when it changes, we can do some mathematical calculations with JavaScript and change some of the experience with JavaScript. Not typically, but once in a while it's kind of needed. So yeah, this default answer thing, the way we supply it is first we put the string with the question, then a comma. Most lists in CSS and JavaScript are going to be with a split with a comma, and then default answer. I really don't think you're going to find many situations where you need a default answer. Unless you want to save the user time and they just click enter and be done with it. But here's the problem. What happens if I ask how many cats do you want? And then you say 5. So if you enter 5 and then I want to always add one more cat for you, what do you think will happen when I try to add the result of the prompt, number of cats, plus 1? The answer is already there, but What two things are we adding? We're adding a string to actually a integer. And in the world of JavaScript, there's a lot of decisions it makes. And this is one of those decisions where even though it can see that the person entered 5, so it should be able to assume that it's a number, it doesn't. Every time a user is putting in information, it kind of counts it as a string. So then you have to actually take it and change it to be an integer. How do you think I'd go about doing that, changing a string to an integer? We use another one of these little JavaScript helpers, basically is what I call them, like alert and prompt. And this one is called parse int. What do you think it does when I pass it a string that holds the value 5? Sorry? Yep, it will convert it into an integer. What's the problem if I ended up doing something like this? Can you see a problem with what might happen next? Yeah, integers are typically whole numbers, so when you give it something like that, I'd be interested even to know what it ends up telling us that this is supposed to be. So parse int. Plus 2. Save and run. 2 point. Okay, that worked out well. But with JavaScript, you have to be very careful. If you want to be getting exact numbers, floats can be also a nightmare. They can do some crazy, crazy different things than you'd expect. Their whole lists of people kind of putting in different little things they find about JavaScript that is always amazing us. So what do you think are some solutions to, let's say, if you have to do an application that has to handle numbers really, really well? Do you think you have to go and find every one of these problems with JavaScript? Or do you guys think there's an easier way to handle that specific situation? Let's say you're building a financing app or tax application. What do you think would be a good way to go? And I'll give you a quick reminder. When we're building websites with CSS and HTML, are there a lot of weird edge cases with different browsers doing weird things and different sized browsers having to react differently that we found a way they could, speed up that process? What was that quick way to help ourselves by using, Say again? Normalize, sort of, yeah, basically. Frameworks, right? And there's a lot of amazing JavaScript frameworks for handling numbers. I've used 3 different ones for different situations, finance.js, etc. So there's systems out there that will allow you to kind of give it very much random data and always be sure it's going to be accurate when it's doing these combinations. So 99% of the time, we don't actually use pure JavaScript because that is asking for a lot of frustration. We rely on a lot of different systems that help us utilize JavaScript in the better way. But sometimes, if you need, a person to enter in something like 5 or 6, parse int is pretty stable. And a quick question: how would I convert a number into a string? So we use parse int to take a string that had 5 and make it into a number 5. What if I want to turn number 5 directly into a string that just holds the character 5 inside of it? Go ahead. Even easier than that. Remember how JavaScript already was kind of taking our number that we were trying to add to it and automatically converting it to a string? Plus quote quote. You just add a empty quote and automatically convert it into a string. It's always trying to go towards string, basically. Is that confusing? I hope so. I mean, JavaScript is supposed to be one of those languages with a lot of weird little problems. Okay, So now we've stored these variables, and that's really great. We can even get variables from the user. So as soon as they come to our page, we can ask them, hey, do you want to see ponies or do you want to see unicorns floating on the page? And you can get that answer. But how do we actually determine if we are giving the user that choice of ponies versus unicorns? How do we then figure out which one of the two they selected? So if I have my variable choice, type in choice, and that's a prompt which says pony or unicorn. Okay, so let's just say for the sake of this that our user is going to definitely type in this or this. How do I then take his result and do something different? I have to ask myself a question. If they chose pony, then I can load the hero image to be some beautiful Indian pony. If they chose unicorn, then I say, hey, JavaScript, change the style of the hero to now have the unicorn. And the way we do this is we say if choice equals pony. And parentheses. All our if statement, all the different questions you want to ask have to exist within these parentheses. Then we curly brackets, kind of like the CSS. And then we can say something like, hey, you know, the body of the page, the body element, style equals background from. So what just happened? I asked the question, if the prompt result, which we stored in the choice variable, is equal to pony, curly brackets, what goes inside the curly brackets? No, just JavaScript, but it's JavaScript that gets executed only if what is true. If that equals to that. So in case that happens, then we can do anything we want inside of this code block and perform that code. And yeah, you're right. I did some sort of style CSS. But can you tell me how I actually did that? I don't even think that's like where you get to correctly select it. But I'm selecting the body element somehow, and then you choose the attribute called style. And what do you think goes in these quotes? CSS, right? Does that look similar to, just if you took this part right here to here? Have you seen that? Even though we banned it in the class? In my styles, it's a way to actually force an element to display some sort of style. But since we banned them, is there something bad about using it? Yeah. Oh, there's no CSS. I was only saying, since we already know that in a rule, instead of CSS, we use curly brackets, I was just trying to associate. I'm sorry, there's nothing about CSS in this. This is all JavaScript. But it is similar in the sense of we have some kind of a rule, and if we hit that rule, then we perform the code inside of these curly brackets. So this could be doing a million of other JavaScript things. I'm just personally deciding to change the HTML attribute style to do something else, which is very common. But again, since we banned using the style attribute in class, is this okay? It is. It actually is. And here's the reason why. Because our front-end CSS/HTML code should stay clean, meaning that if we're trying to add some CSS rules, they're going to be able to basically never override the style attribute of the HTML element. That's why we don't use it. It gets such a high priority that we have to use things like important, and it becomes a nightmare. You're literally forcing that element to almost no matter what, do what you're saying. But JavaScript actually is almost 80% of the time going to use this, because do you think JavaScript has access to changing the actual CSS code? Not really, no. Not unless you have a virtual DOM with React or something. And then also what you got to keep in mind is 90% of the time you're using these kinds of style attribute selections to hide the element. So if you have some kind of a drop down, or if you have a carousel, you need to for sure hide it, right? You're forcing only one slide to be showing at a time. So then it's actually a good thing that you are kind of the big dog and you're forcing that element to hide itself. Also, if our user was asked what kind of a hero they want to see, a pony or a unicorn, then would it be a good thing if for some reason we add a class, instead of changing the style, we just add another class to that element? And somewhere in our CSS is another class that overrides it, so they're always going to see a picture of cookies instead of what they actually chose. So this being an interaction that the user has performed, then it's okay to almost force it to always be the case. Yes?
The equal sign, is that it has to be coded that way, or if you just put one equal sign, would that...
One equal sign has a specific purpose in almost all languages. What do you think the one equal sign typically does? It's an assignment. You're saying this equals this, so whatever's on the right side takes in whatever's on the left side, or goes into the left side. Most languages, though, are good, nice, beautiful languages, and they allow us to only use two equal signs. The reason in JavaScript we are forced to use three equal signs is because that's saying, I want to compare this to this absolutely. Meaning, if you only used two equal signs, you will get many random, kind of, sometimes it works this way, sometimes it works this way. As one example would be 1 equals, quote, quote, 1. That's true. But should it be true? Because this is a character 1 and this is the number 1. So this is why in JavaScript you're forced to use three equal signs. The only times you don't have to use three things is if you're saying less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. But that's really it. Because you're typically comparing stuff. So yeah, three equal signs means absolute comparison of the two items. One equal signs is assignment of this value going into this variable. So are you guys understanding what I mean by like this is okay because the user said this should happen? There's only one way to override a style attribute CSS. Does anyone know what the only way to override it is? It's the other thing we banned in class. If you could read that. Important. That's the only way. And it's actually a nice thing because I've had situations where you're using some JavaScript library that does a lot of cool stuff, but then for some reason it's forcing some element to display improperly. And so this way you can actually still force it back to important. So now the only time you would use important is if you're overriding a JavaScript library. Let's look at an actual if statement. So here we're using the worst possible variable called x, and then we're prompting where does the Pope live. If they type in the Vatican, then we say correct. Now the syntax does get a little funny here because there is no semicolon up here or down here. But I think in CSS it's almost the same, right? We have our rule, we have the curly brackets, and then each CSS property on every line ends with a semicolon. So that's kind of nice. That is somewhat close to CSS.
Does the response have to be capitalized?
Actually, if you say 3 times equals equals equals, it has to be the exact same. And I always love to like test how far you can push JavaScript. So let's try it. Oops. So lowercase doesn't work, 3 equal signs. All right, so it's not doing it in this case, which is good. Let's try it this way. What was it? And I have to stress how important this stuff is. When you're building slightly larger systems with JavaScript, you are constantly comparing if things are one thing or another. So if you slightly expect one thing to happen, yet another happens. Oh, here's a good one. So if they're correct, would 0.1 plus 0.2 equal 0.3? I mean, I think it should, right? But what do you guys think this is? I have a feeling what we talked about earlier with integers and floats. That's the little problem there, is that the value of 0.1 plus 0.2 is apparently 0.300000004. And actually, you know what? I wasn't clicking the wrong button, so that was my bad. 1, the number is equal to 1, the quote. When I run it, we get the alert. If I add another equal sign, it does not alert, right? So always use 3 equal signs. Actually, most common editors, like even Visual Studio Code, is going to forbid you from using 2 equal signs. And it will tell you a little warning. You have no idea what the result is going to be. So don't risk it. All right. So let's actually build a fun trivia game with just a little few things we've learned today. I have a variable that holds my score, which starts off as 0. Then I ask a question like, where does the Pope live? If they answer the Vatican correct, then what do I do to the score? I add 1. And if they type something else, is this going to get executed? Yeah, so everything in these curly brackets will only be run if the statement is correct. Then I can ask, where does Angel live? And if you say Santa Barbara, it'll give you another correct score. So let's look at this code. Yes, thank you, that's the next point I was going to bring up. Because you got to handle normal use cases for a user. So let's run this code first. And Pope lives in the Vatican, and Angel lives in Hawaii. Oh, I missed one. So then it tells me you got to score 1 out of 2. Now, that was a great point, right? Do you want people to accidentally or type in lowercase Vatican, which is a very common situation, and have that not be counted? So I type in Vatican, thinking, yeah, that should be right. And then I get 0. So how do you think you'd go about handling that? Do you think just using only 2 equal signs will do it? No, so 2 equal signs is the devil. It will never be consistent with what you might expect it to do. It doesn't happen. You just never know what JavaScript is going to do, and it's changing even, so it's not definitely something you want to rely on. Instead, what I prefer to do is to say if x is the Vatican, actually, here's the better solution. I could be very wrong, but I haven't memorized all the JavaScript shortcuts. Let's see. Yep. So that did work. And here's the good news, right? It's not the same syntax we used when we used prompt, parse int, etc. Instead, you type in this dot and you say 2 lowercase. We're not going to get into it today. This is because a string is like this object that has all these available properties that you can do to it. For now, yes, you need to handle all those use cases. And this is a very common thing to do, is actually to just force both. If you force both things to be lowercase, then you have basically no concerns, no matter where the data comes from. So how did I do this? Let's follow the logic real quick. First, I have my score 0. Then I store the answer from the first question. And then I store the answer from the second question. If any one of these is correct, I tell them, hey, correct. I add 1 to my score. What would happen if I didn't declare score up there? I think JavaScript might be forgiving here. Not forgiving enough. So it checked my answer, it alerted, and once it came back, it was like, wait, what's score? If you haven't created the bucket to store the information, it won't really work. How do you guys think you can start? Yes?
Would it make a difference then if your variable for score was, say, sandwiched in between those two?
In here?
Yeah. So if it's
It will not.
okay.
And the problem with JavaScript is that it is a functional language, so it goes from the top to the bottom. And most of the time, if you don't have a way to handle these kinds of errors, once it breaks, the rest of your stuff breaks. It's really sensitive. It's like, so how would we figure out that there was a problem in our page if this was our code? How can I know something bad happened? Huh? I definitely can inspect it. So I can click inspect. I can go to the console, not the elements. And here, I can simplify this by saying clear the console first and run. Okay, type in Vatican, correct, and then boom. Uncaught, reference error, score is not defined. I think it's pretty reasonable amount of information considering like other languages like Python would just say sorry. And then you can click on that little link and guess where it took me to? What do you think this yellow highlighted line means to me? It's probably where the problem is. A lot of languages actually, it might be somewhere way higher up. JavaScript's pretty good about saying, hey, here's there. All right, guys, take a breather, create a game with this, and back in 10.
No, if you do not enter install for this. And then for this no.
This one is a godsend when you're learning CSS, because as you're looking at some code design, let's say this one for example. If I can only find the logo. That is CSS viewer. As soon as I click to activate the extension, I can hover over elements like this title. And as soon as I hover over it, it'll tell me font size. There we go. That's better. All right, so this title right here, it's 40 pixels. The font size, the font weight is 500. The line height, the text decoration, all this stuff. Now, some of this stuff a little bit useless, but here's the nice thing. Compared to Chrome, it groups them in nice categories for you to view. So color and background is one, the box sizing, the display. And then my favorite part is this effects. What do you guys think that does? I know it's hard to see, but it's hard to fit into resolution. Transition, all 0 seconds. Do you guys remember anything about transitions? Yeah. See how when I hover over these, they do that really cool little like slide up effect in the shadow? So I think we can find some cool things here. So let's find this element. Okay. What did I click on? Aha. Okay. So we're back to business. Does that seem the shadow, the box shadow? Color, background, position, weight. Huh. I'm not seeing the box shadow. Can you guys see it from, yeah, you can see the shadow, right? So now, let's see if we can remember some tricks on our own to help us figure out how to get that shadow. Which element should we be looking at here? We have this column, a layout demo, an anchor, which is clickable, or the image. If the whole thing is supposed to be a button to click on, which element do we typically use for buttons? Can everybody close their laptops, please? Thank you. So this is the stuff you're going to be using whether you're like taking inspiration from other themes and templates or you're trying to modify your own theme. And since a lot of these frameworks-based themes are going to have so many different divs, it's going to be kind of a nightmare to figure out where is that cool effect that I'm trying to change or use happening. And so in this situation, I figure that the anchor is that big button because you can see the little crosshair the whole time through. So where's the shadow? Box shadow. And it's pretty straightforward except for this insane 51 pixel blur. I don't think I've seen a blur that huge. Well, what is the cool effect here? Let's see if I can turn off this extension. Okay, the cool effect that I like is when you hover over these buttons, they're interactive. They do this nice little slide up animation. And to get that animation just right like that can be really tough. So stealing here is a good decision. So how can I tell what exactly is the animation that's happening when I hover over it? I do have a transition which animates which types of things. Yeah, every type of motion is going to be animated for 0.2 seconds. And then how do I find out exactly what happens when I hover over the item? There's a pseudo selector that we can force on this element and say, hey, show me what happens when it's hovered. So give ourselves a little bit of room here. Let's make sure we're looking at the right element. Seems like nothing changes here. I have an idea that, is anyone noticing a change now? Why would that be the case? Thoughts?
Do this one with information for that image. You know the whole information.
Yeah. Now, I'd love to know where the actual animation is happening. Oh, wait. No. I got it. Yes, sorry. Okay. So here's what happens. Negative 10 pixels top. I also do this in certain situations when you want to make sure that the user doesn't get startled by the actual, like, why did they hit the edge of the button or whatever. It only then does the animation. And especially when it's a cool animation like this, it's worth doing it the other way. So there is a column that holds the image. There's also a layout demo, I think that holds a specific image. Yeah. There's a layout demo. Then they call the, layout demo. The column is on top actually. Column, layout demo, image or anchor, and image. So what would be the benefit of using the layout demo? It's hover to animate the image versus the anchor itself. One thing that actually sadly is still the case to this day is what type of element is the anchor by default? Does an anchor go and take up the whole space, or does it like to live within other elements? It's in line, which actually causes some browsers to have a slightly weird time about accepting it as a hoverable block element. So sometimes you might notice the cursor going from the hand icon to the cursor icon once in a while, because the browser is kind of recalculating all the styles of the page. And it's like, wait, this is an anchor, so it's in line, but not a block. So the nice thing about using a div, what type of element is a div to begin with? It's block. So the browser will always accept a hover on the block element. So if we handle the hover on the layout div, how can we actually make the anchor inside of it have a margin top negative 10 pixels? How do we select something inside of an element that has been hovered? Yeah, space. Basically, CSS, you select LD, then you say when there's a hover, it's a pseudo selector, then find the child, which is an anchor, and set its top to negative 10. So straightforward. And that gives us another cool thing that it gives us is that little padding that's around the image, meaning that that whole shadow area is also hoverable. So it ensures that it gets triggered when you even get close to it. Questions? So what is the trick if we are clicking hover on this anchor and absolutely nothing changes? Where do we go? Yeah, we kind of keep going up the tree, and then we found out that it controls the anchor's positioning. And I just want to look at exactly how much extra space that gives us. So the layout demo, do you see that like orange space? That's the additional spacing we're getting. So when we go between elements, let's uncheck that real quick. What's the other problem here? If I didn't use the demo layout. As soon as my mouse would come off of that one, it wouldn't instantly start activating the next one. So I think it's a smooth experience when one is going down, then the next one goes down. Yeah. All right, so this web page, I actually feel is somewhat horribly coded. So let's go to Facebook and see if it's easier to analyze it with CSS viewer. What type of stuff can I steal by going around these elements and learn? Anyone? It can help us visualize all the boxes, yeah, absolutely. Well, there's no copyrighted CSS. You can steal almost all of it as long as you're not saying that you're Facebook. The type of stuff that I personally look for is if you look at the font size, and it's hard to see, but it says 12 pixels. What's the line height? 16.08. I'd be surprised if that's not the golden ratio rule. Then you have like this input field is going to have some interesting stuff. Like for example, the text decoration is interesting. I think that's removing a Chrome style. Input fields, so this is a form, right? This is how you actually collect data from users. Input fields are actually a very classically difficult problem to solve. And when I say that, I mean, if I try to type something in here, looks great. But sadly, if you have the wrong line height, it will cut off your text. If you set a large line height, it will make the input box actually not be perfectly aligned. So it's a combination of like padding and line height that can make a really good input box to work across multiple browsers. So I love looking at websites like Facebook because their coding is obviously going to be something to look into. Then we can look at this little item. What do we notice that's bad about that icon that puts Facebook in the Stone Age? Anybody? It's hard to see maybe from where you guys are sitting, but it's blurry because it's PNG. Why do you guys think they're using a PNG here? It's a sprite, you think? Maybe. I think it's because they have to support the oldest of browsers you've ever imagined. So Internet Explorer 7 does not support SVGs. And when you're Facebook and have 6 billion users, you have to make sure that you're supporting every single type of browser. So if this is a button, what do we expect it to have? I know it's going to be hard for you guys to see. So let's make it a little bigger. Let's see what a Facebook button has. Has some padding. Has a min width. Anyone curious to guess why they set a min width? So most of the time when you guys are building websites, you kind of have these givens. Like for example, that it's going to say in that box, sign up. But do you know how many languages Facebook is translated in? A huge amount, meaning that in some languages, maybe in Chinese, it's only 2 characters short, meaning if you only use padding, that button will become so small that it will look very ugly. And since we've had to translate FreeCamp in like 15 languages now, I've had to deal with left to rights and small sizings. What type of display did they change this button to be? Inline block, right? So all the standard button stuff, they changed the cursor to pointer as well, which is nice. Added some fixed shadow, etc. Here's the type of stuff I do steal a lot. Do you think if you just try to code up a nice shadow on that text, you can make it look good easily? Oops. Or get that gradient just right with a nice white border on top? I don't think I can ever do it. I think I spent like a few days and I couldn't get it to look this good. So I love to steal these kinds of things, like their text shadow looks really good. That green might modify a little bit, but overall, much better button than I would be able to create. So CSS Viewer allows us to go around. Now, my resolution just sucks, but I promise you have a much better experience with that one. Web Appleizer tells you the types of frameworks, backends that are being used by an application. So if I go to freecamp.chat, I can say Webalizer, what is this system using? And it'll tell me WordPress for the content management system, WooCommerce for the e-commerce, the database is MySQL. It even found out that I added Firebase to it, which is great. Basically, it's a great way to understand like what is used by the different like websites you like, because like not everyone loves Bootstrap, right? I personally love UIKit, so I found a WordPress theme that uses UIKit, and I really enjoy that. So if you're wondering what are those guys using, you should be able to find out for the most part what are they using. Here's some cool ones. The web developer toolbar is like the oldest thing in the book. It's before the dev Chrome tools existed. At this point, honestly, I don't even think it does anything that the Chrome dev tools do not do. So unless you want to disable things, I don't see any reason for using that one. The web developer checklist is phenomenal because it allows you to, right before you show it to your client or right before you put your website up online, it is going to give you a great list of problems. And let's look at this page. What is it missing? Has some meta tags missing, gives you a link to go figure out how to add that, a meta description. Do you guys think that not having a meta description will affect your Google result positioning? Yeah, like absolutely. Like that is used, the meta description is what Google uses to put under the title of your website when it's showing it in the results. And the closer that your description matches to what people are actually searching for, the higher up you're going to show up in the results on Google. So this is a great list to go through and make sure that you are hitting all of these. And this theme seems to be hitting a very low speed, which I was kind of worried about from the code that I saw. All right. Anyone uses Grammarly? Yeah, it's the best. If you're not using it, you're crazy. It really helps you write better English with little effort. Yes? It will. So yeah, if you don't put a description, a description, it will go to the first section of your website, but you will not get as like good of a basically match in their system. There used to be something called meta keywords, which used to be very important. Seems like Google has stopped looking at it, but maybe Bing is looking at it, so who knows, maybe it's still good to have. This one, if you use the font awesome icons, this is a really quick way to be getting finding additional icons to use. Sonar, I believe, yeah. If you're testing your website for speed, there we go. I have a feeling this website will not rank as high as it should. So what is it telling us here? Anyone? Any thoughts? Good things, bad things? What was the load time? 5.6 seconds. Is that fast or slow? Yeah. What do you guys think is like a sort of reasonable / acceptable load time? Huh? Under 3 seconds. Yeah, I'd say so. Why did it just load this like 2-3 seconds faster? Yeah, browser cache. Should we rely that since our user comes to our website for a second time, it will feel now a little faster? Absolutely not. The first experience, just like in dating or trying to raise money, the first experience is the most important. So probably pretty easy to figure out where the bottlenecks are. It even told us there's a file there. Google Fonts is only nothing crazy. Their CSS seems to be huge, and I have a feeling I know why. If you take a framework and you use their like less version or SAS version, and then you add your own, the generated result is almost adding 2 frameworks at the same time. So you have to be careful when you're overwriting a framework how deep you want to get into the whole overwriting process. Here's one of my favorite ones, sitemod. This is really, really awesome, and a lot of students that send me like their final project or something that they need help with, I can end up using this to sitemod. So this is one of the editors that allows you to basically take the web page, make some adjustments like directly into it. What was it? And then you can take the source code, copy and paste. It's like basically like an easy editor to change a page and see how it looks. Sitemod. There it is. It allows you to log into either your GitHub or your Bitbucket. These are online code storing systems. And once I log in, I stay away from getting too deep into it, but I'll explain what it does. Let me just click here. All right. So I'm going to add a mod, fork. Can anyone notice the difference in the URL? Are we still on the same web page? Anyone? No, we're on sitemod.io. So it took that entire web page for us, it downloaded it, and it created a version that we can mess around with. Typically, I use this to make changes and then submit them to my designer, like, hey, why don't we change this, and why don't we change that, I believe. This resolution will be found on me. All right, there we go. So you use the code editing tools to change any element, like that one, to font size big enough. Then we click on sitemod, and we say save. Okay. You can also annotate parts of the page, etc., etc. Okay. And now I can send this link. So I'll go into a private mode and paste that link in. What do you notice? All the changes you do in the developer tools are applied to your version of this web page. How could this be useful to you guys? I mean, if you like some theme out there, this allows you to kind of download it to your own little version, make changes to it, play with it. You can save multiple versions. What is GitHub?
I was very ambitious in the first class, and I got everyone on GitHub to submit their homework. As excited as I was, I had forgotten that when I started working for a new company, when they used some other version of GitHub or whatever they used to store code, it was like a whole 10-day nightmare trying to get used to it. That being said, who heard that Microsoft acquired GitHub for like $16, $18 billion?
Anyone?
The reason it was cool news is because it was a multiple of like 32 times how much revenue GitHub was actually making. What is GitHub? So me and Zoe are working on a Zen web application for coding. And when we all start a project in this class, we create what's the first thing we create for our project. The main folder. So we can put what file? What's the first file our project needs? Index.html, and then some CSS file. Now, what if we create a bunch of tasks like, hey, we need to change the index.html so that the header now has different links, and then at the same time, there's another task for Zoe to change the footer to say, I don't know, add like some nice hero section in the bottom of the index.html page. So how can I send her my code and then have her work on it? I can zip it, right? So I can put this into a nice project zip, send it over to her. It takes, let's say, 2 days to do the changes. At that same time, I've been working on my index.html. They made like 300 line changes. She makes another 150 line changes. What's the problem now? Yeah, how do I figure out what she did and how does it interact with what I've done? Especially like if I work mainly in the top part of the page and she works at the bottom part, it's still going to be a B to combine them, right? So nobody does that. There's no such thing as these folders that we create. We don't zip things. We don't email them. We use a repository. There are a few different systems. Git is the most popular now, but they all do very much the same thing, which is you create a folder online. And this folder is called master. Okay. Master, and the name of the project is for me. All the files I take from my folder. And when I create this repository, I literally say push. Literally what's called. I push them. Once I push my files, Zoe goes home and she says, hey, I want to work on the footer. So she pulls the code. Now, as soon as she pulls the code and starts making changes, any file she changes is called an unversion. Actually, it's not a version, it's just a modified change. So as soon as she makes one little change in index.html, this whatever system she's using, there are hundreds of them, will tell her, hey, looks like there are changes to index.html. So they'll have a little indicator of change. So what if I've already made my changes, additional ones, to index.html, push them to master? What do you think will happen if she tries to push to master and there are lines that have changed on both versions? Yeah, it'll be like, whoa, hold on. It seems like line 35 on the master version says A, and line 35 on her version says B. So we just stop you and literally say, hey, look at these two files, and for each thing that is different on the same lines, tell me which one you want to keep. So say Angel made this change like 3 hours ago, and he put this message when you push the code to say this is what I did. and it'll allow you to choose one or the other. So it's a great way to, one, you never ever lose your code, which is obviously like one of the biggest aha moments. If for whatever reason she copies my zip and then throws some breaking changes, how do I go back and figure out what's the last time that my index.html is working? With version control, every single time you push your things to the cloud, you have what's called a version, allowing you to, one, never ever lose code, so you can safely erase huge parts of your website, and B, work with a lot of people on the same files and not have major problems getting it back into one. Yep. Not exactly. GitHub, actually, the website itself has become really good at being able to edit online, and it might even tell you somebody else is editing it, maybe. But that's called peer programming, and you use like Visual Studio Code has software on it that you can use to connect to people from your team on the midterm and code together remotely. GitHub gets complicated pretty quickly because of all the amazing features that it has. But it is extremely useful because, for example, the system I'm building right now, every time I just say, hey, code, go up to the cloud, it triggers all these different systems and basically uploads my app instantly to the App Store. It uploads the app to the website. It does all these different little cool things. So if we are catching up on JavaScript towards the middle end of the class, we will look at GitHub for sure because it's really, really great. Okay, and let's see, I had another one here. Form filler. Anyone think they might guess what this is useful for? If you're testing out your website many times and you keep having to sign up as a brand new user and put different details, it can be kind of frustrating. I actually use it on our competition websites when I'm testing out their product. All it does is you click on it and it'll try to populate every single field on the page with some fake data for you. It tries to guess what it is and it'll populate it for you. So as a quick example, I'll go to one of our main competitors and sign up. So see, it created timuxi@mailnator.net. You can make it even more random. Let's see how smart it is at filling out my first and last name. Wow. So it knew that it's two names that I'm asking for. It checks the requirements for the password. I doubt it'll be smart like this, but yeah, good enough. So I just signed up for FreeCamp with clicking that button. Much faster to get in there, start messing around with the system. So basically as a developer, you're going to be filling out a form over and over to make sure that it's still working, and the form filler helps. Huh. I am pretty sure I've already shown you guys the one that I do use absolutely every single day, a few times a day. The name of it is called Rocket. What was it? So cdnjs.ext. That's a horrible name. Yeah, I guess it's called cdnjs. This gives me access to every JavaScript library, CSS framework, etc. that I need to add to my website just by typing in, let's say, Bootstrap. It will not only give me like the latest version 4.2 of Twitter Bootstrap, but if I click on it, it will give me all the different versions and subfiles. It even lets me choose like an older version if I want to go back. So it's really, really useful. Yeah, there are many, many amazing extensions out there. The ones that I've listed here, I think are going to help you guys in the short term. Especially being able to like understand how websites are
achieving certain visual things with its shadows, text shadows. This SEO Quake, even though I didn't go through it, very useful. And here's the thing, you guys have the choice of going with WordPress or writing your own website with JavaScript and finding some template. What do you think are some good ways to ensure your website is successful if you need to have amazing SEO? Let's say with WordPress, do you guys think it's hard to have extremely good SEO with WordPress if you're willing to spend $40? No, they're actually the best. They have like plugins that are very affordable that do some of the best job I've ever seen. They don't only analyze like that you're doing all the right things with the image tags and all that normal stuff, but they analyze your actual language with machine learning to make sure that the tone you're using is like much more well received by Google. So yeah, WordPress is by far the best way to have amazing SEO. If you don't use WordPress, then there are a lot of tools like SEO Quake, Moz SEO, and a bunch of others that will give you basically a list of things that you're not doing correctly. So let's see, let's go to a web page like these guys, see what kind of SEO they're doing. SEO Moz, type under. I shouldn't have switched to dark theme. It's WooRank is a good one actually. So here's one called WooRank, which will also compare your website to other websites in the world. Let's see what analysis we get. Oh boy, it's a lot of red things. They will give you a lot of useful information before you have to pay, so don't get discouraged by the whole 14-day trial. So where is my information? All right, missing meta description, right? Again, these are some of the more obvious things. Keyword cloud, I think it's telling me these are pretty mediocre keywords. Sitemap, who knows what a sitemap is and why it's useful? Do you think Google comes to your page and can instantly tell what are all the sub-pages you might have with amazing content? No, I mean, their bots will sometimes keep going deeper and deeper, but if you had a sitemap, especially in certain situations, so let's say you're running some kind of a community and you have thousands of pages, basically for each one of your members, there's a profile page. Google's not going to go thousands of pages with their bot trying to find every piece of information, but if you give them a sitemap, they're much more likely to go and get whatever data is on those pages out publicly. We just released something called Public Projects, where you get all our premium features of FreeCamp for free as long as your project is public to the internet. And we have this sitemap now with 80,000 projects, allowing Google to find them, get information to the people that are interested in it. So one cool project is this rover that's going to go on the moon. No, sorry, on Mars. And a lot of people are interested in getting updates from them. So when they Google that rover, was it the Titan rover, they're going to find their public project and see how things are going. So as we keep going down, it looks like it's very much mobile friendly. Favicon is too similar. What is that? What is that telling us here? So it's saying asset compression. Oops. Do you guys think this is actually like as bad as they're making it seem? It looks like my file is not that huge, and they're reducing it by 64%. If it started at 30 kilobytes, I'm not sure that's like as impactful as they make it seem. But all right, what do we? Somebody please tell me why you would do this. Priya, why would you do this? Why would you run this tool on your website? And like a lot of these terms might seem foreign to you. Is that a problem? Like, for example, there was something here that said, like sitemap, if you didn't know what sitemap is, or we didn't find AMP on your page. Is that a deal breaker? No, all of this stuff has hundreds of like blog articles written. All the SEO experts write blog articles telling you how to like optimize these things. And there's this question mark here that tells you, hey, it's this, get it from here, do this to implement it. All I wanted you guys to get from this is that if you use WordPress, you're going to have to go through a few less hoops because it sort of sets all these things up for you. Without WordPress, you will have to make sure to run these tools to ensure that your website is doing good. All right. There is a great book that I recommend for JavaScript. There's an introduction, JavaScript and jQuery, by the same guy that did our HTML book. So if you are interested in having some material to read besides the stuff that I post, definitely a good suggestion. Does anyone want a link? I think I should written it somewhere. So let's make it. JS book me. Everybody get it? JS book me? Awesome. So I've been actually looking at that book as a good inspiration on some of the ways they like to teach this stuff. I totally had forgotten when I was young learning JavaScript how excited I got by the prompt that I could actually get people to put information and I can make it interactive. I will post some of these links later down the road once we feel a little more comfortable with JavaScript. There is one that I want to talk about. Okay. Okay, if you have time, this Code Avenger tutorial is pretty fun. I was walking through it. You basically create a photo booth app that runs sort of like in a mobile device. And they do, I think, a really good job of telling you what the challenge is. A couple of things I do want to highlight is if their instructions are at times a little confusing, you can always click on the hint button. So you click check, it says, okay, you're all good. Go next. And then you're going to read through basically all the different steps. By the end, you will have a photo taking application that uses your actual camera and applies filters to the taken photos, which is pretty fun, I thought, for just following a few instructions with HTML, JavaScript. So this is only if you have time, not required. Nice to kind of do for fun. And then I referenced two other resources from previous classes. This is what I call the ultimate introduction to JavaScript. Keep in mind this is a lot more complicated than what we touched on today. So open at your own discretion. And then there's a JavaScript additional training recording. This is where I went through all of that and then went through Firebase and showcased how in like 4 lines of JavaScript code you have a full authentication system with as many like types of methods as you want, and then be able to actually store, add, edit, delete data pretty quickly. So if you're feeling not challenged by the things we're learning, I hope you start hitting some of these items and progress forward. Quick questions about JavaScript? Anyone scared? Concerned? Come on. I'm scared. Come on. Somebody. Nobody's scared? No, it's scary.
Because you're not only learning like another language, right? We learned HTML, we learned CSS. Now there's a whole different syntax, and with JavaScript, you can really spend some time kind of trying to understand why things are not working, and it could be just because you missed the equal sign. It will scream at you, for the most part. But that's why I want us to learn just the basics of JavaScript and then jump into Vue, because it's actually a lot simpler environment where you're using HTML to interact with the user. By simply knowing the right attributes, you can actually handle a lot of logic with very little effort. I learned JavaScript by first learning a library called jQuery. Has anyone heard of jQuery? So jQuery basically takes all those complexity of JavaScript, all the little nuances,
and just says, forget about those things. You just have to learn like 4 principles, and you can do a lot of really cool functionality on a web page. Whether it's hiding, sliding, showing things, making calls to different databases, handling submissions of forms, etc. It makes it very, very trivial. So go home, try to do the homework, or at least a part of it tonight, and you can do the rest over the weekend. But with JavaScript, I promise you, if you just decide to stay in class and learn it all, it's going to be harder. You need to be doing the exercises. It's really, really important. The more you practice this stuff, the better you'll get with it. And there's no shortcut to mastering these topics. So. Yeah. Absolutely not. Enjoy it. No, you're good.
I don't have room in my backpack, so.
Okay, I will bring it tomorrow as well.
Okay.
I'll just leave it in my backpack.
And then I'm doing like a project for like
Okay.
Um,
What does he do?
it's just like a simple website. He does like appliance repair, like.
Okay. Does he have a website currently?
He does, but it's like super old, and he just wants it to be like updated or
Yeah.
whatever. And like, yeah. So
Okay.
he said like I can just make like a whole website.
Yeah, so I think you're gonna really like some of the WordPress stuff that we're gonna do, because they have a lot of options. There's one theme that I got licensed for everybody that has like 20-something different themes you can choose from, and I think they would all kind of easily integrate with the type of website you're talking about. And you can have basically you can add as many complicated features as you want. So if you want to allow people to book him maybe or make requests and stuff, you can do that.
Like all of he wants is like an area where he can like show the products and just like ideas.
Show or sell?
Like show.
Okay. No, I mean,
And come in
not going to sell it. Okay.
Like,
Or maybe
super simple.
contact them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Do I use like Visual Studio Code? Like how do I like?
We'll get there. But it's with WordPress, you actually pretty much don't use any code editor unless you're. No, you actually don't. The only code editor you use is like the Chrome DevTools to like adjust code, like the CSS stuff the way you like it, and then you implement it into the actual like theme. So we're gonna go through all that stuff with Prior's website. We're gonna look at a lot of different theme options, and kind of how that stuff works. So yeah, it'd be great. Cool. Hey.
Did you record the last 2 sessions since I was on site?
Yes. Well, so the last session I recorded, the session before that,